October 15th, 2023. A decorated officer in a crimson blazer reached for her briefcase outside the federal building when 3 cops tackled her to the pavement, screaming she was impersonating someone important. But they had no idea she'd just been sworn in as their new boss that morning. What happens when the badge they're trying to rip off belongs to the woman who can end their careers with a single word? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn sun blazed overhead as Chicago's Federal Plaza buzzed with its usual Tuesday rhythm. Lawyers clutched espresso cups, weaving through clusters of tourists, snapping photos of the flamingo sculpture. Food trucks lined South Dearborn Street, their exhaust mixing with the scent of roasted almonds from a corner vendor. It was 1:47 p.m., and the city hummed with the comfortable chaos of midday business. Dr. Maya Richardson stood near the plaza's north entrance, her crimson blazer catching the light like a beacon. The tailored fabric moved with her as she bent to retrieve her briefcase from the bench beside her. She'd just finished a meeting with the mayor's liaison, a formality really, after this morning's private swearing-in ceremony. Her fingers brushed the leather handle when a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. "Step away from that bag." Maya's head turned slowly. 3 uniformed officers approached in a wedge formation, their boots striking the concrete with deliberate heaviness. The lead officer, a stocky man with a crew cut and a face mapped with broken capillaries, pointed directly at her. "I said step away," he barked louder. His hand drifting toward his belt, Maya straightened, her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" "Don't play games," the second officer snapped. This one was younger, mid-20s perhaps, with nervous energy radiating from every movement. "We got reports of someone matching your description acting suspicious near federal property." The third officer circled to her left, positioning himself to block any exit route. He was silent, but his eyes tracked her every micro-movement with predatory focus. Maya's voice remained calm. "I work here. I was just leaving a meeting." The lead officer's laugh was short and ugly. "Right, and I'm the Pope. Lady, we've seen this game before. Designer clothes don't make you legitimate." A businessman walking past slowed his stride, glancing over his shoulder. A woman pushing a stroller stopped completely, her phone already rising toward the scene. The plaza's energy shifted, pedestrians sensing conflict the way animals sense storms. "Let me show you my identification," Maya said, reaching slowly toward her blazer's inner pocket. "Hands where I can see them." The young officer's voice cracked with adrenaline. His hand now gripped his weapon, though he hadn't drawn it. "Size siges tastan sitisnan. Don't you dare reach for anything." Maya froze, palms turning outward. "My ID is in my jacket pocket." I'm reaching for it slowly. "She's going for something," the young officer shouted. And before Maya could process the absurdity of the accusation, hands seized her shoulders. The world tilted. Her cheek slammed into the plaza's stone surface with a crack that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Pain exploded through her jaw. The briefcase skittered away, spilling papers that scattered like startled birds across the pavement. "Get your hands behind your back." The lead officer's knee pressed into her spine, grinding her ribs against unforgiving stone. "Stop resisting." Maya hadn't moved. Her body remained still, her breathing controlled despite the crushing weight. But the command echoed across the plaza anyway, a performance for the growing audience, establishing a narrative that justified the violence already deployed. A teenage girl gasped audibly. An older man in a business suit stood frozen, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. Phones emerged from pockets and purses like a crop of mechanical flowers, all aimed at the woman in crimson, now pinned to the ground. "I'm not resisting," Maya said, her voice strained but clear. "I'm complying." "Shut up," the third officer growled, yanking her arms behind her back. Metal bit into her wrists as handcuffs clicked shut, each ratchet tighter than necessary. "You people always talk too much, you people." A woman's voice rang out from the crowd. "Did he just say you people?" The lead officer ignored her, his fingers rifling through Maya's blazer pockets. He pulled out her phone, a slim wallet and a leather credential case. He tossed the phone and wallet aside without examination, but paused at the credential case. He flipped it open, squinted at the contents, then snapped it shut. "Fake," he announced to his colleagues. "Good quality, but fake." "It's not fake," Maya said quietly. "Look at it again." The young officer snatched the case from his partner's hand and held it up to the light. His brow furrowed. "Sir, this looks—" "I said it's fake," the lead officer cut him off. "These fraudsters are getting better with forgeries. Probably bought it online." A man in a grey suit pushed through the gathering crowd. "I'm an attorney. You need to check that identification properly." "She has a right—" "Step back, counselor. Unless you want to join her," the third officer warned, his hand moving to his cuffs. The lawyer stepped back, but his phone stayed raised. Maya turned her head slightly, the rough stone scraping her skin. Through the forest of legs and shoes, she could see her scattered belongings. Official documents bearing the city seal lay exposed to the wind. Her commissioning letter, signed by the mayor just 6 hours ago, fluttered against someone's boot. "She's got a whole fake identity kit here," the young officer said, gathering the papers. "Birth certificate, some kind of official letter." "This is organized crime stuff." "Organized crime," Maya repeated softly. The accusation was so absurd it almost made her laugh. But she'd learned long ago that laughter in moments like these only made things worse. A delivery driver abandoning his truck joined the crowd. A group of college students pressed closer, their backpacks bumping together. An elderly black woman clutching groceries shook her head slowly, her eyes wet with recognition. Not of Maya specifically, but of the scene itself, timeless and terrible. "Why are you doing this?" someone in the crowd called out. "She's not fighting you." "Yeah, she's just lying there." Another voice added. The lead officer's face reddened. "Everyone back up. This is official police business. If you interfere, you will be arrested." But the crowd didn't move. The phones didn't lower. The documentation of injustice continued, pixel by pixel, witness by witness. Maya closed her eyes briefly, drawing on reserves of patience built over decades. This wasn't her first encounter with badges that saw her skin before her credentials. At 19, campus security had detained her outside the library she'd studied in every night for a semester. At 27, she'd been pulled from her own car at gunpoint because the vehicle was too expensive for her to own legally. At 35, mall cops had followed her through Nordstrom, certain that her shopping bags contained stolen merchandise. Each time, she'd survived. Each time, she'd filed it away as the price of existing while black in America. But this time was different. This time, she had the power to ensure it would be the last time, at least for these officers. The lead officer hauled her roughly to her knees, his grip bruising her bicep. "Look at all these people filming like you're some kind of victim. You're a criminal, and everyone's going to see that when we process you." Maya lifted her chin, meeting his eyes directly. Her voice emerged quiet but steel-edged. "You should check that credential case again. Very carefully. I don't take orders from suspects," he sneered. "You will," Maya said, and something in her tone made the young officer shift uncomfortably. The crowd pressed tighter, a human wall of witnesses. The autumn sun continued its arc across the Chicago sky, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. And on the stone plaza of the federal building, surrounded by the architecture of justice, Maya Richardson knelt in handcuffs, waiting for the moment when everything would change. The crowd had swelled to nearly 40 people within minutes. What began as curious glances had transformed into a wall of witnesses, their bodies forming a semicircle around the scene. The afternoon shift change at the nearby courthouse had released a flood of clerks, paralegals, and junior attorneys, many of whom now stood transfixed by the spectacle unfolding on federal property. "Get Sergeant Holloway down here," the lead officer barked into his radio, sweat beading on his upper lip despite the cool October air. "We've got a situation. Possible identity fraud, resisting arrest, and a hostile crowd." Maya remained on her knees, wrists bound, her crimson blazer now dusty and torn at the shoulder seam. She said nothing, but her eyes tracked each officer's movement with the calm assessment of someone reading a playbook they'd memorized long ago. A young woman with purple-streaked hair pushed to the front of the crowd, her phone positioned at eye level. "I'm streaming this live," she announced, her voice shaking but determined. 12,000 people are watching right now. "Ma'am, lower that device and step back," the third officer commanded, finally speaking. His name tag read Brennan, and unlike his colleagues, his face showed the first hairline cracks of uncertainty. "It's my constitutional right to record police activity in public," the young woman shot back. Her screen glowed with rapid-fire comments scrolling past. "Everyone can see what you're doing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. The young officer, his name tag identified him as Torres, grabbed Maya's scattered papers from the pavement. He shuffled through them quickly, his eyes widening as he scanned the official letterhead. "Lieutenant Dawson," he said quietly to the lead officer, "some of these documents have the mayor's signature. And this commissioning letter—" "Forged," Dawson interrupted, snatching the papers from Torres's hands. "All of it. You think the mayor personally signs letters for criminals?" "Use your head." A man in a three-piece suit materialized beside the purple-haired streamer. His silver cufflinks caught the sunlight as he raised his own phone. "I'm Marcus Chen, partner at Rothstein & Associates. I specialize in civil rights litigation." He spoke clearly, projecting his voice for the cameras. "I'm witnessing what appears to be an unlawful detention based on racial profiling." "That's a serious accusation, Counselor," Dawson spat. "One I'm sure you can't prove." "On the contrary," Chen replied, his tone clinical. "I can prove you never properly examined her identification before making physical contact. I watched the entire encounter from the moment you approached." A black woman in nurse's scrubs pushed through the crowd, her hospital badge swaying on a lanyard. "I saw it too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She tried to show you her ID and you knocked her down. My daughter is watching this on TikTok right now, asking me why the police are hurting someone who looks like her teacher." The words hit the crowd like an electric current. Murmurs swelled into audible conversations. A construction worker in an orange vest shook his head. "This ain't right, man. She's compliant as hell." Dawson's jaw clenched. He whirled on Maya, crouching down to her level. His breath smelled of coffee and cigarettes. "You think you're smart, hiring people to play witnesses? We're trained to spot coordinated resistance." Maya met his glare with glacial composure. "I haven't hired anyone. These people are simply observing what you're doing in broad daylight." "Shut your mouth," Dawson hissed, then stood and addressed the crowd. "This woman is under investigation for fraud and impersonation of a government official. We have reason to believe she's using stolen credentials to access secure buildings. Anyone interfering with this arrest will be charged with obstruction." "What arrest?" Attorney Chen called out. "You haven't read her Miranda rights. You haven't stated probable cause. You've only made accusations." Torres shifted his weight from foot to foot, his hand hovering near his radio. "Lieutenant, maybe we should call this in properly." "Get a supervisor." "I am the supervisor here," Dawson snapped. "And I'm telling you this woman is a con artist. Look at her. Does she look like someone who works in the federal building?" The silence that followed was devastating. Even Torres looked away, shame coloring his features. The nurse in scrubs stepped forward, her voice rising. "What exactly is that supposed to mean? Does she look like someone who works here?" "Say what you really mean." A college student with a university hoodie joined in. "Yes, say it." "Tell us what you mean by look like." The crowd pressed closer, anger crystallizing into collective action. The purple-haired streamer rotated slowly, capturing every face, every reaction. Her phone screen showed the viewer count climbing past 20,000. Brennan pulled Dawson aside, speaking in urgent whispers that several nearby witnesses strained to hear. "This is getting out of control. We should verify her story before—" "Before what?" Dawson shot back, his voice carrying farther than he intended. "Before we let another fraud walk free because we were too scared of cameras. No, we process her by the book, And when it turns out she's a criminal, all these people filming will look like fools. A UPS driver who'd abandoned his route joined the gathering, his brown uniform crisp despite the day's work. I deliver to the federal building 3 times a week. I've seen her before. She goes in through the executive entrance. Dawson rounded on him. And how much did she pay you to say that? The driver's face hardened. Nobody paid me nothing. I'm just telling you what I've seen. Maya's phone, still lying on the ground near her scattered belongings, began to buzz insistently. The screen lit up with an incoming call. Mayor's office, direct line. The purple-haired streamer zoomed in on the display, and her live stream chat exploded. Her phone's ringing, someone in the crowd announced. It says Mayor's office. Torres bent down to look, his eyes widening. Lieutenant, her phone. Don't touch it, Dawson ordered. It's evidence. Could be pre-programmed with fake caller IDs. Attorney Chen laughed, a sharp sound devoid of humor. You're seriously suggesting she pre-programmed her phone with a fake mayor's office number, knowing she'd be randomly detained today? That's your theory? The construction worker pulled out his own phone. I'm calling the mayor's office right now. Public number. Let's see if they know who she is. You'll do no such thing, Brennan interjected. But there was no authority in his voice anymore. Only desperation. The phone rang 4 times before a crisp voice answered, Mayor Johnson's office, how may I direct your call? The construction worker put his phone on speaker. Yeah, hi. I'm at Federal Plaza. Police have detained someone, and I'm wondering if you can verify if Dr. Maya Richardson works with the city. A pause, then, Dr. Richardson, is she all right? She left here just an hour ago after meeting with the deputy mayor. Why would the police detain her? The crowd erupted. Gasps and exclamations bounced off the federal building's stone facade. The construction worker held his phone higher so everyone could hear. They're saying she's committing fraud. That her credentials are fake. The voice on the phone turned sharp. That's absurd. Dr. Richardson was sworn in this morning. Who is the supervising officer? I need to speak with them immediately. Dawson's face had gone from red to ashen. He strode forward and grabbed the construction worker's phone, ending the call with a vicious jab of his finger. That proves nothing. Anyone can claim to work for the mayor. You just hung up on the mayor's office, the nurse said, her voice breaking between disbelief and rage. You're making this worse with every second. Maya finally spoke again, her voice carrying across the plaza with quiet authority. Lieutenant Dawson, you have one opportunity to stop this before it becomes irreversible. Remove these handcuffs and verify my credentials properly. That's all you need to do. Dawson's face contorted. You don't tell me what to do. Criminals don't give orders to police. She's not a criminal. Multiple voices shouted simultaneously. The purple-haired streamer's phone pinged with a notification. She glanced at it, then looked up with wide eyes. Someone just tagged the Chicago PD's official Twitter account. This video is going viral. 40,000 views in the last 5 minutes. Torres pulled out his own phone, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through social media. His face went pale. Lieutenant, we're trending. People are identifying her. They're saying she was just sworn in as, I don't care what the internet says, Dawson roared. We're taking her in. He hauled Maya to her feet with unnecessary force. Her knees buckled briefly before she steadied herself, standing tall despite the humiliation. Despite the pain radiating from her scraped cheek and bruised ribs, the crowd surged forward, not threatening but insistent, a human tide of witnesses refusing to look away. And in that moment, standing in handcuffs before dozens of cameras and hundreds of eyes, Dr. Maya Richardson smiled, small, knowing, and absolutely certain of what was about to happen next. Maya stood motionless as Dawson tightened his grip on her arm, his fingers pressing into the exact spot where an old scar lived beneath her blazer. A scar most people would never see, but one she felt every time someone grabbed her without permission. The crowd's noise faded to a dull roar as her mind drifted backward, triggered by the sensation of powerlessness wrapped in the costume of authority. Detroit, 1997. Age 17. Maya sat in the passenger seat of her debate coach's Honda Accord, tournament trophy gleaming in her lap. They'd just won state finals. Her closing argument on criminal justice reform had earned a standing ovation. Coach Henderson was driving her home through a neighborhood she'd known her entire life when the flashing lights appeared. "License and registration," the officer demanded before Coach Henderson could even roll the window fully down. "Officer, is there a problem?" Coach Henderson asked, his white hand steady on the wheel. "Your taillight's out." "And who's she?" The beam of the flashlight hit Maya's face, making her squint. "This is my student." "We're coming from a debate tournament." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Step out of the vehicle, miss. Why does she need to—" Coach Henderson started. "Now." Maya stepped onto the cracked sidewalk 2 blocks from her grandmother's house. The October air bit through her blazer. Navy blue then, not crimson. 2 more patrol cars arrived within minutes. "What's in the bag?" An officer yanked her backpack away, dumping its contents onto the hood of the car. Debate evidence cards, highlighters, her AP government textbook, all scattered like garbage. "Tournament materials," Maya said quietly, her 17-year-old voice steady despite her racing heart. "This car's been reported in a theft ring. You're going to tell us where you got the merchandise you're transporting." Maya's eyes widened. "Merchandise? That's a debate trophy. I just won." "Don't lie to me." The officer stepped closer, his badge catching the streetlight. "Girls like you don't win trophies. They steal them," Coach Henderson argued. Neighbors emerged from their homes, recognizing Maya, vouching for her. It took 40 minutes before the officers finally acknowledged their mistake, a mistake that left Maya's achievements scattered across a police car hood, her dignity trampled, and a seed planted deep in her chest. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. The handcuffs bit into Maya's wrists, yanking her back to Federal Plaza. Dawson was speaking, but she barely heard him. The purple-haired streamer had moved closer, her camera capturing Maya's distant expression. "She looks traumatized," the nurse whispered to someone beside her. "Like this has happened before. It had Washington, D.C. 2004, age 24. Maya emerged from Georgetown Law Library at 11 p.m., her arms loaded with casebooks for her constitutional law final. She'd been inside for 6 hours, surviving on vending machine coffee and determination. Her beat-up Toyota sat in the parking garage's 3rd level, one of only 5 cars remaining. She was fumbling for her keys when the security guard appeared, flanked by 2 campus police officers. "That's your vehicle?" The guard pointed at her car. "Yes, sir. You have proof of ownership?" Maya shifted her books to one arm, fishing for her wallet. "My registration's in the glove compartment. My student ID is right here. Don't move." One officer's hand went to his weapon. "Keep your hands visible." The books tumbled from her arms, legal precedents she'd been memorizing, scattering across oil-stained concrete. Miranda v. Arizona, Terry v. Ohio, Brown v. Board of Education. Cases about rights, about equality, about justice, all lying in a parking garage while she stood frozen. Someone reported this vehicle as suspicious. Said they saw a young black female getting into an expensive car that doesn't match the student demographic. Maya's Toyota had 140,000 miles and a crack across the windshield. But she said nothing. She knew the script by now. They ran her plates, checked her ID 3 times, called it in to dispatch, made her open her trunk, her glove compartment, her backpack. One officer picked up her Georgetown Law student ID and studied it like a counterfeit bill. "You really go here?" he asked, skepticism dripping from every word. "Yes, 2nd year. Top 15% of my class." "Huh." He handed back her ID without apology. "You can go, no explanation. No acknowledgement of the humiliation. Just permission to retrieve her scattered books and drive home with shaking hands, adding another layer to the armor she was building, piece by painful piece. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Attorney Chen's voice cut through the memory. Maya blinked, refocusing on the present. The crowd had grown larger, now exceeding 60 people. Office workers leaned out of federal building windows, watching from above. "I'm fine," Maya said, though her voice carried a weight that suggested otherwise. Dawson noticed her momentary absence. "See, she's dissociating. Probably on drugs. Torres, add substance suspicion to the report." "She's not on drugs, you idiot," a woman shouted from the crowd. She's a human being processing trauma that you're actively causing. The construction worker who'd called the mayor's office stepped forward again. How many times has this happened to you? He asked Maya directly, his voice gentle despite his size. Maya met his eyes. More than I can count. Chicago, 2015. Age 35, Captain Maya Richardson. She'd earned the rank just 3 months earlier, stood in line at Whole Foods in Lincoln Park. Her cart filled with groceries for a dinner party she was hosting for her unit. She wore jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt. Her off-duty uniform. The store manager approached, accompanied by 2 security guards. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Maya's stomach dropped, that familiar sensation of reality tilting. "Excuse me? Someone reported you putting unpaid items in your bag." She looked down at her reusable shopping bag, which contained only her wallet and phone. "I haven't put anything in here except my personal belongings. We have it on camera. Please don't make a scene. 20 minutes in a back office. Footage reviewed. Nothing found. Not a single item unaccounted for." The witness who reported her had mysteriously disappeared. "Sorry for the inconvenience," the manager said, his tone suggesting it was her fault for looking suspicious in the first place. Maya walked out of that Whole Foods with her paid groceries and a crystallized understanding. No rank, no education, no achievement would ever fully shield her from the assumptions people made when they saw her skin before they saw her credentials. But that understanding came with a promise she made to herself. When she had enough power, she would dismantle every structure that allowed this to continue. "Lieutenant Dawson." A new voice boomed across the plaza, deep and commanding. Maya's eyes snapped to the source. A broad-shouldered man in a sergeant's uniform pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with exertion. His name tag read Holloway. The supervisor, Dawson, had called for backup. "Sergeant, thank God," Dawson said, relief flooding his features. "This suspect, what suspect?" Holloway's eyes swept the scene. The scattered papers, the phones recording, the woman in handcuffs standing with quiet dignity. His face went pale. "Lieutenant, who authorized you to detain?" She was acting suspiciously outside federal property. "We have reason to believe, you have reason to believe." Holloway's voice rose. "Did you verify her identification?" "It's forged, sir." "All of it." Holloway stepped closer to Maya, his eyes widening in recognition. He'd been in the back row at this morning's private ceremony. He'd watched her take the oath. "Lieutenant Dawson," he said slowly, each word carefully measured, "do you know who this is? A criminal trying to—" "This is Dr. Maya Richardson." Holloway's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the plaza, everyone heard him. "This is our new chief." The crowd gasped collectively. The purple-haired streamer's phone nearly slipped from her hands. Torres stumbled backward, his face draining of all color, but Maya didn't smile. Not yet. She simply stood there, handcuffed and bruised, her crimson blazer torn, her dignity intact, and waited for the recognition to fully land, because she'd been waiting for this moment not just for the last hour, but for 26 years. The word chief hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The live stream viewer count on the purple-haired woman's phone jumped to 75,000. Comments flooding the screen faster than anyone could read them. Dawson's face cycled through confusion, denial, and finally landed on aggressive dismissal. "That's impossible." "Holloway, you're mistaken. The new chief isn't—" He stopped himself, but the unspoken words echoed louder than anything he'd said so far. "Isn't what, Lieutenant?" Maya asked, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. "Finish your sentence." "The new chief isn't what?" Dawson's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Sergeant Holloway stepped between them, his hand instinctively moving toward the handcuff key on his belt, but Dawson blocked him. "Sir, with respect, I think someone's feeding you bad information. This woman matches the description of a fraud suspect who's been—" "I was at her swearing-in ceremony this morning," Holloway said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "In the mayor's private conference room, 6 hours ago. I watched her take the oath of office." The nurse in scrubs pressed her hand to her mouth. Attorney Chen slowly lowered his phone, his professional composure cracking into something resembling awe. The college student whispered to his friend, "Holy shit! This is insane!" Torres backed away from Maya as if she'd suddenly become radioactive, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of career-ending catastrophe. "Lieutenant, if she's really, we need to—" "She's playing you," Dawson insisted, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. "It's a con, a sophisticated one, but still a con. She probably has accomplices in the department feeding her information." Maya turned her head slightly, the handcuffs forcing her shoulders into an awkward angle. "Lieutenant Dawson, what's your badge number?" "Excuse me?" "Your badge number." "It's a simple question." Dawson's face reddened. "I don't answer to suspects." 7429, Maya said calmly. "Issued June 2008. You've been with Chicago PD for 15 years, 7 months. Patrol Division for 9 years, before transferring to Federal District Liaison in 2017. You've received 2 commendations and 4 formal complaints, 3 dismissed, and resulting in a written reprimand for excessive use of force in 2019. The crowd went silent. Even the traffic noise from the surrounding streets seemed to fade into nothing. Dawson's face was drained of color. How do you—" "Officer Torres," Maya continued, her eyes shifting to the young officer. "Badge number 38612. You graduated from the academy 14 months ago. Top of your class in criminal procedure, which makes your failure to follow it today particularly disappointing." Torres looked like he might vomit. "And Officer Brennan," Maya said, completing her recitation. "Badge number 5578. 10 years of service. Exemplary record until today. I reviewed all 3 of your personnel files last week during my transition briefings. I've reviewed every file in the department." The purple-haired streamer zoomed in on Dawson's face, capturing every micro-expression of dawning horror. Her live chat exploded. "She knows everything. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. They're so screwed." Attorney Chen stepped forward, his lawyer instincts immediately recognizing the shift. "For the record, I'm witnessing a superior officer being detained by subordinates who failed to verify her identity. Every second these handcuffs remain on is another count of unlawful restraint. She could have researched those numbers," Dawson argued weakly. "Anyone with internet access?" "Directive 2847B, Maya interrupted. "Implementation date October 1st, 2023, 2 weeks ago. It revised use of force protocols to require verbal de-escalation attempts before any physical contact with non-violent subjects. You violated that directive approximately 90 seconds after making contact with me." Holloway closed his eyes briefly. "That directive isn't public yet. It's internal only." "Exactly," Maya said. "It was my first policy change. I signed it on my 3rd day as chief." "Designate!" The construction worker started laughing. Not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity of watching a woman in handcuffs systematically dismantle her captors with nothing but knowledge. "Man, she's been playing chess while you were playing checkers." Dawson's hands trembled as he pointed at Maya. "This doesn't prove anything. She could have stolen that information. Hacked our systems." "Protocol 17, Maya said quietly, and the effect on Holloway was immediate. His head snapped up, his eyes widening. "What did you say?" Holloway asked. "Protocol 17. Subsection C, emergency verification procedure for command-level officers detained under false pretenses by subordinate personnel." Maya's voice remained calm, almost conversational. "It was implemented in 2019 after a deputy chief was wrongfully detained during an undercover operation. I'm invoking it now." Holloway's face went from pale to ashen. "Lieutenant, Protocol 17 requires immediate verification through central dispatch. If she's correct about—" "She's bluffing!" Dawson shouted, but panic had replaced confidence in his voice. "Then verify it," Maya suggested. "Call dispatch. Ask for a Protocol 17 confirmation. They'll need my badge number, which is 001. The first badge number issued in the new administration." Torres fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Dawson tried to grab it from him, but Brennan stepped between them, his face set in grim resignation. "Lieutenant, we need to check this. Now!" The crowd pressed closer, forming a tight amphitheater around the unfolding drama. The UPS driver held up his phone, showing his screen to the people around him. "Twitter's already confirmed it. There's photos from this morning's ceremony. That's her. Same crimson blazer and everything. A woman in a federal courthouse employee badge pushed to the front. I saw her this morning. She came through executive security at 7 a.m. They saluted her." Another voice joined in. The Chicago Tribune posted about the swearing in on their website. New chief, first black woman to hold the position, Dr. Maya Richardson, Ph.D. in criminal justice from Northwestern. Dawson looked around wildly, his authority collapsing in real time. "This is a coordinated attack. They're all in on it. Dispatch, this is Sergeant Holloway, badge 5280. Holloway spoke into his radio, cutting Dawson off. "Requesting protocol, 17 verification for badge number 001. Confirm identity and rank." Static crackled for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then a crisp female voice responded, "Badge 001 confirmed. Dr. Maya Richardson, Chief of Police, Chicago PD, sworn in 0800 hours this morning. Sergeant Holloway, what is the nature of this verification request?" The plaza erupted. Gasps and shouts merged into a single wave of collective shock. The purple-haired streamer screamed into her phone, "It's confirmed! She's really the chief!" Her viewer count hit 100,000. Holloway's voice was barely above a whisper when he responded to dispatch. "Chief Richardson has been detained by patrol officers. She's currently in restraints." The silence on the other end of the radio was deafening. When the dispatcher spoke again, her voice was ice. "Repeat that, Sergeant." "The chief is in handcuffs," Holloway said, and the words seemed to physically pain him. "Stand by. Routing this to the mayor's office and internal affairs immediately. All units be advised. Chief Richardson is to be released immediately, and any officers involved are to remain on scene pending investigation." Torres's knees buckled. He caught himself against a nearby bench, his face gray. Brennan stood frozen, staring at Maya with the expression of a man watching his career burn in real time. But Dawson wasn't done, his face contorted with desperate fury. "This is wrong. The system is broken. You can't possibly be. Someone like you can't be in charge of someone like me," Maya repeated, her voice soft but laced with steel. "Please, Lieutenant Dawson, continue. I want the 80,000 people watching to hear exactly what you mean by someone like me." Dawson's mouth worked silently, trapped between the truth he believed and the consequences of speaking it aloud. Maya shifted her weight, the handcuffs clinking. "Officer Torres, you graduated top of your class in criminal procedure. Apply that knowledge now. What should happen next?" Torres looked at her, then at Dawson, then at the crowd of witnesses. His voice cracked when he spoke. "The restraints should be removed immediately. An apology should be issued, and an internal investigation should be opened." "Correct," Maya said. "Now do your job." Torres stepped forward, his hands shaking as he reached for his handcuff key. Dawson grabbed his arm. "Don't you dare! Let him go, Lieutenant!" Holloway ordered, his voice carrying command authority for the first time. "That's an order." Dawson's grip loosened. Torres's key turned in the lock, and the metal cuffs fell away from Maya's wrists with a click that echoed across Federal Plaza like a judge's gavel striking the bench. Maya brought her hands forward slowly, rubbing her wrists where the metal had bitten into her skin. Bruises were already forming, dark against her brown skin. The cameras captured every mark, every piece of evidence. She straightened her torn blazer, lifted her chin, and addressed the crowd. "I want everyone here to remember what you witnessed today. Not just what happened to me, but what happens every day to people who don't have badges, credentials, or cameras to protect them." The nurse in scrubs started crying. Attorney Chen nodded slowly, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine emotion. The construction worker raised his fist in silent solidarity, and Dawson, stripped of his authority and his certainty, stood trembling as the full weight of his actions finally settled on his shoulders. The reckoning had only just begun. Maya stood in the center of Federal Plaza, freed from the handcuffs, but bearing their marks on her wrists like evidence branded into flesh. The autumn sun had shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the stone pavement where she'd been slammed down less than an hour ago. The crowd had swelled to over 100 people now, forming concentric circles around the scene like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. 3 news vans screeched to a halt at the plaza's edge, their satellite dishes extending skyward. Reporters spilled out with cameras and microphones, their producers already barking into headsets about going live. The story had escaped the confines of social media and burst into mainstream consciousness with the force of a dam breaking. Chief Richardson, a reporter with a Channel 7 badge, thrust a microphone toward Maya. "Can you confirm that you were physically assaulted by officers from your own department?" Maya raised her hand, and the gesture carried such natural authority that the reporter immediately fell silent. The murmuring crowd quieted. Even the traffic seemed to hush, as if the entire city leaned in to listen. "Before I make any statement," Maya said, her voice projecting across the plaza without shouting, "I want everyone watching, here and online, to understand something crucial. What happened to me today is not unique. It's not special. It's not even unusual." The purple-haired streamer adjusted her angle, capturing Maya's face in perfect focus. The viewer count had climbed past 200,000, with numbers rising by the second. The only difference between my experience and thousands of others is that I had the credentials to prove who I was, the education to know my rights, and the rank to demand accountability. Maya's eyes swept across the crowd, making contact with individual faces. Most people don't have those advantages, and this happens to them anyway. A second reporter called out, "Will you be pressing charges against the officers involved?" "All questions will be answered," Maya replied, "but not until we've completed proper procedure. Sergeant Holloway, I need you to contact Internal Affairs immediately. Full investigation. I want every witness statement documented, every piece of video footage preserved, and every policy violation catalogued." Holloway nodded, his face grave. "Yes, Chief, I'll personally oversee—" "No," Maya interrupted gently but firmly. "You'll recuse yourself. You were present at my swearing-in, which creates a conflict of interest. I want Lieutenant Sarah Mendez from IA to take the lead. She doesn't know me, and she'll conduct this investigation without any personal bias." Attorney Chen stepped forward, addressing the crowd and cameras rather than Maya directly. "For the record, I'm witnessing a superior officer who was assaulted and falsely detained, now ensuring that her own investigation follows proper chain of command and conflict of interest protocols. This is what accountability looks like." The crowd murmured approval. A woman near the front shouted, "That's leadership!" Dawson, who had been standing frozen since the handcuffs came off, suddenly lurched forward. "This is a setup. Don't you see? She orchestrated this whole thing. Got herself detained on purpose, to make us look bad, to undermine the department from day one. Lieutenant Dawson." Maya's voice cut through his conspiracy theory like a scalpel. "Are you seriously suggesting that I arranged to be thrown to the ground, handcuffed and publicly humiliated as some kind of political stunt?" "You people always play the victim," Dawson shouted, his composure finally shattering completely. "Always looking for reasons to cry racism, to sue the department, to—" The crowd erupted in outrage. Boos and shouts drowned out whatever else Dawson might have said. The Channel 7 reporter's eyes went wide as her cameraman zoomed in on Dawson's face, capturing every word for the evening news. "You people," Maya repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "Officer Torres, did you hear Lieutenant Dawson just now?" Torres, who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole, nodded miserably. "Yes, Chief. And what is the department's policy regarding racially charged language directed at community members or fellow officers?" Torres's voice was barely audible. "Immediate suspension pending investigation. Mandatory sensitivity training. Possible termination depending on severity. Thank you for that accurate recitation of policy. Maya turned back to Dawson. Lieutenant, you've now added discriminatory language to your list of violations. In front of approximately, she glanced at the purple-haired streamer's phone, 230,000 witnesses. A Channel 5 reporter pushed through the crowd. Chief Richardson, how does it feel to be racially profiled by your own officers on your first day? Maya took a breath, and for the first time since the ordeal began, emotion flickered across her carefully controlled expression. How does it feel? It feels like every other time I've been profiled. Like I'm 17 again, watching my debate trophy get dumped on a police car hood because officers couldn't believe I'd earned it. Like I'm 24, being detained in my own law school parking garage. Like I'm 35, being accused of shoplifting while grocery shopping in uniform. The plaza went silent, except for the click of camera shutters. It feels, Maya continued, her voice strengthening, like proof that a badge doesn't protect you when your skin is seen as a threat. It feels like evidence that we need systemic change, not just policy memos. And it feels like exactly why I fought for this position. Because if this can happen to me as chief of police, imagine what happens to everyone else. The nurse in scrubs was openly weeping now. The construction worker wiped his eyes roughly. Attorney Chen recorded every word on his phone, already mentally drafting the lawsuit he knew would follow. A third reporter shouted, "What happens now to these officers?" Maya turned to face Dawson, Torres, and Brennan directly. All three stood in various states of shock and dread, their futures hanging in the balance of whatever she said next. "Officer Torres," Maya said, "you graduated top of your class. You knew the protocols. Why didn't you follow them?" Torres's voice cracked. Lieutenant Dawson said you were suspicious. He's my supervisor. You thought obeying an unlawful order was acceptable because it came from a superior." Yes, I'm sorry, Chief, I was wrong. Maya nodded slowly. "Officer Brennan, you have 10 years of exemplary service. You've received 4 commendations for community policing. What happened today?" Brennan's jaw worked for a moment before he could speak. "I saw a black woman in an expensive suit and I assumed she didn't belong there. I was wrong." "There's no excuse." "You're right," Maya said quietly. "There is no excuse. But at least you're being honest about your bias." She turned to Dawson. "And you, Lieutenant, do you have anything to say?" Dawson's face was purple with rage and humiliation. "I have nothing to say to you." "Then let me say something to you." Maya stepped closer, and despite being 6 inches shorter than Dawson, she seemed to tower over him. "You violated every principle of the oath you took. You saw a citizen, your superior officer, and your first instinct was violence based on nothing but appearance. You compounded that violation by refusing to verify facts that contradicted your assumptions. And when confronted with evidence of your mistake, you doubled down, hurled racist accusations, and attempted to fabricate charges rather than admit you were wrong. The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every moment of Dawson's dismantling. "That's not policing," Maya said. "That's tyranny dressed in blue." The crowd applauded. Not politely, but with the fierce energy of people who had finally seen justice assert itself. A fourth reporter called out, "Chief, will they be fired?" Maya held up her hand again. "That decision will be made through proper investigation and disciplinary procedures. What I will say is this: effective immediately, all 3 officers are suspended without pay, pending the outcome of the internal affairs investigation. Their weapons and badges will be surrendered to Sergeant Holloway within the hour. They are prohibited from any law enforcement activity or from contacting witnesses to this incident." Torres removed his badge with trembling hands, staring at it like a man seeing his dreams dissolve. Brennan's face was stoic, accepting his fate with grim dignity. But Dawson's hands remained at his sides. "Lieutenant Dawson," Holloway said quietly. "Your badge, now." "I won't give my badge to her," Dawson spat. "Then you're giving it to me," Holloway replied, "and adding insubordination to your charges." For a long moment, Dawson didn't move. The tension stretched taut across the plaza, everyone waiting to see if he would comply or escalate. Finally, with movements stiff with rage, Dawson unpinned his badge and slapped it into Holloway's palm. Maya watched this transfer without expression, then addressed the crowd and cameras one final time. I want to be clear about what today represents. This is not about 3 officers. This is about a culture that allowed this to happen. A culture where a woman in professional attire can be violently detained based solely on the color of her skin. A culture where officers feel empowered to ignore procedure because their prejudices feel more reliable than evidence. She paused, letting her words sink in. I became chief to change that culture. Today's incident doesn't weaken my resolve, it strengthens it. Because now you've all seen exactly what we're up against. And now you know I won't back down. The applause that followed shook the plaza. People cheered, cried, and raised their phones higher, capturing a moment that would be replayed in classrooms and training sessions for years to come. The Channel 7 reporter pushed forward again. Chief Richardson, one final question. Do you regret becoming chief after what happened today? Maya looked directly into the camera, her bruised face and torn blazer telling their own story alongside her words. I regret that we live in a society where this is still necessary, but I don't regret taking this job. Not for 1 second, because every person who was detained, profiled or abused by officers who saw their skin before their humanity deserves someone who understands, someone who's lived it, someone who will fight like hell to make sure it ends. She turned to walk toward the federal building steps, her heels clicking against stone, her bearing regal despite the visible signs of trauma. The crowd parted like water, creating a path for her to move through. Behind her, Dawson shouted one last desperate accusation. You'll destroy this department. You'll make us weak. Maya stopped, turned back, and her smile was small but devastating. No, Lieutenant. I'll make us just. And if justice makes you feel weak, then you were never strong to begin with. The purple-haired streamer's phone showed the viewer count crossing 300,000 as Maya climbed the courthouse steps. By the time she reached the top and disappeared through the doors, the video had been shared 40,000 times, spawned 50 news articles, and ignited a national conversation that would burn for weeks. The woman they'd tried to erase had become impossible to ignore, and the reckoning was only beginning. Maya stood inside the federal building's marble lobby, the glass doors separating her from the chaos outside, doing little to muffle the sounds of the crowd. She could see them through the windows, reporters jockeying for position, citizens raising their phones, the 3 suspended officers being escorted away by Sergeant Holloway. But for the first time in 90 minutes, she allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished marble wall. Torn crimson blazer, scraped cheek blooming into a bruise, hair disheveled from being thrown to the ground. She looked like she'd survived a war, which wasn't far from the truth. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, the one Dawson had tossed aside like garbage. She retrieved it from where a helpful witness had collected it with her other belongings. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages. The notifications kept coming in waves. The first call was from Mayor Harold Johnson. She answered, Maya, I just saw the footage. The mayor's voice was tight with controlled fury. Are you all right? I'm fine, sir. Bruised but functional. I'm watching CNN right now. You're on every major network. This is... He paused, and she could hear him choosing his words carefully. This is exactly what we feared would happen, and exactly what we need people to see. Maya understood the political calculation immediately. Her assault was a nightmare for the department's reputation, but it was also irrefutable proof of the very problems she'd been hired to fix. The mayor had taken enormous political risk, appointing the city's first black female police chief. Now that risk had been validated in the most brutal way possible. I want internal affairs to have unlimited resources, Maya said, watching through the window as news helicopters circled overhead. And I want the investigation completed within 2 weeks, not the usual 6 months. You'll have whatever you need. The mayor's voice softened slightly. Maya, you could take medical leave. No one would question it after what you've been through. Medical leave sends the wrong message, sir. It says that when they knock me down, I stay down. I won't give them that satisfaction. A pause. Then, you're sure? I'm certain. Maya's reflection in the marble showed her straightening her torn blazer, lifting her chin. I have work to do. She ended the call as the building's security chief approached, a retired lieutenant named Marcus Webb, who'd worked with her father decades ago. His weathered face showed a mixture of concern and rage. Chief, I saw the whole thing from the security office. We have it on 6 different camera angles. Crystal clear footage of everything they did to you. Webb's hands clenched into fists. I've already isolated the files and backed them up in 3 separate locations. Nobody's going to make this footage disappear. Thank you, Marcus. Send copies to Lieutenant Mendez in IA, the mayor's office, and my personal secure server. Chain of custody documentation for everything. Already done. Webb hesitated, then added, Your father would be proud of how you handled that. He always said the best revenge against injustice is making sure it can never happen again. Maya's throat tightened. Her father, a beat cop who'd worked the South Side for 30 years, had died 5 years ago, never living to see his daughter become chief. But his lessons had carried her through every moment of today's ordeal. He taught me well, she said quietly. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. I was in the crowd. I'm a civil rights attorney. I have extensive footage and 17 witness statements already. We're building an airtight case. Marcus Chen, then another text from the purple-haired streamer. Video hit 500K views. Every major news outlet is requesting permission to use my footage. Told them only if they credit you properly and don't edit out the racist parts. Hope that's okay. Maya smiled for the first time since the incident began. The digital army was mobilizing without her having to lift a finger. Through the glass doors, she watched as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the plaza's edge. The door opened, and Lieutenant Sarah Mendez emerged, a stern-faced woman in her 40s with a reputation for ruthless thoroughness in investigations. She'd made deputy chiefs sweat during corruption probes. 3 patrol officers were nothing. Maya stepped back outside, and the crowd noise surged. Mendez walked directly to her, ignoring the reporters shouting questions. Chief Richardson! Mendez's handshake was firm and professional. I've been briefed. I'm taking the lead on the investigation, and I want you to know I don't care who you are or what rank you hold. I follow evidence, not politics. Good, Maya replied. That's exactly why I requested you. I'll need your statement, medical documentation of your injuries. And I'll need you to refrain from any contact with the suspended officers or discussion of the case outside official channels. You'll have my full cooperation. Maya gestured to the plaza. There are over 100 witnesses. Most of them recorded the incident. Attorney Marcus Chen has already collected statements. Mendez's eyebrow raised. Civilians building my case for me. That's a first. She pulled out a tablet. I'll start with witness interviews immediately. The mayor's given me carte blanche on resources, so I'm assembling a team of 5 investigators. We'll have preliminary findings within 72 hours. Make it airtight, Maya said. This case will be scrutinized by every police department in the country. It needs to be exemplary. It will be. Mendez's expression softened almost imperceptibly. For what it's worth, Chief, what they did to you was unconscionable. But the way you handled it was textbook. You gave them every opportunity to correct their mistake, and they chose escalation every time, Maya finished. Document that pattern. It's not just about what they did. It's about what they refused to do when given chances to stop. Mendez nodded and moved toward the crowd. Already flagging down witnesses for formal statements, Maya's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Chief Janet Rodriguez, LAPD. Janet, Maya answered, walking toward a quieter corner of the lobby. Maya, I just watched the video. The whole damn executive team at LAPD watched it together. We're all sick. Rodriguez had been a mentor to Maya during a fellowship program years ago. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I need police chiefs across the country to understand that this is what we're up against. This is the culture we're trying to change. You've got our support. I'm sending out a statement within the hour condemning what happened. Seattle, Atlanta, and Houston chiefs are doing the same. We're standing with you. Maya felt the weight of that support settle over her shoulders. This wasn't just about Chicago anymore. This was becoming a national reckoning. Thank you, Janet. That means everything. As she ended the call, Sergeant Holloway entered the building, his face grim. Chief, all 3 officers have surrendered their weapons and credentials. Dawson tried to argue, but I made it clear refusal would result in immediate arrest. They're currently being escorted off federal property. They're body cameras, Maya asked. Holloway's expression darkened. Dawson's was turned off. Torres malfunctioned, or so he claims. Brennan's was running, and the footage corroborates everything the civilian videos show. Of course, Dawson's was off, Maya said, unsurprised. That's another violation. Add it to the list, already documented. Holloway paused. Chief, I need to apologize. I should have been here sooner. When dispatch called about the situation, I didn't move fast enough because I thought it was routine. If I'd known, you couldn't have known, Sergeant. And when you arrived, you did exactly what you should have done. You verified my identity and began proper procedure. Maya met his eyes. Don't carry guilt for their actions. Holloway nodded, but the weight didn't leave his expression. The department's in chaos right now. Word's spreading. Officers are taking sides. Some are defending Dawson, saying you entrapped them. Others are outraged. It's getting ugly. Then we address it head-on. Maya pulled out her phone and composed a department-wide message. To all Chicago PD personnel, today I was assaulted and unlawfully detained by 3 officers from our own department. This incident is now under investigation by Internal Affairs. I expect full cooperation from every member of this force. We will follow procedure, respect due process, and let evidence determine outcomes. But let me be clear. Racial profiling, excessive force, and abuse of authority will not be tolerated. Not against civilians and not against your fellow officers. We are better than what happened today, and we will prove it through our actions going forward. Chief Richardson, she hit send and watched as the message distributed across the department's secure network. Within seconds, responses started flooding in. Some are supportive, some are hostile, some were simply shocked. But everyone in the Chicago Police Department now knew exactly where their new chief stood. Outside, the news helicopters continued their circles. The crowd showed no signs of dispersing. And on every news channel, the footage played on loop, a woman in crimson being thrown to the ground, handcuffed and humiliated before revealing herself as the one person in the city who could end the careers of everyone involved. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an old colleague from her days in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. You just gave us the perfect case study for institutional racism in law enforcement. This will be taught in academies for decades. They tried to make you invisible and instead made you unforgettable. She stepped back toward the glass doors, looking out at Federal Plaza. The spot where she'd been thrown down was now surrounded by news crews. The papers that had scattered across the pavement, her credentials, her commissioning letter, her proof of authority, had been carefully collected by witnesses and would become exhibits in the investigation. Attorney Chen stood near the fountain, coordinating with other lawyers who'd arrived to offer pro bono assistance. The nurse in scrubs was giving an interview to Channel 5, her voice carrying across the plaza. I watched them brutalize an innocent woman, and I'll testify to that in any court in this country. The construction worker had printed out screenshots from his phone call to the mayor's office and was showing them to investigators, proving he'd verified Maya's identity while the officers continued their assault. The purple-haired streamer sat on the courthouse steps, her phone still streaming, narrating the ongoing scene to an audience that had grown to over 600,000 viewers. And somewhere in the city, Dawson, Torres, and Brennan were confronting the reality that their careers and possibly their freedom hung in the balance because they'd seen a black woman and assumed criminality instead of authority. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the glass. Bruised, torn, but unbroken, she'd walked into Federal Plaza this morning as the newly sworn chief of police. She was walking away from it as something more, a symbol of every person who'd ever been judged by their appearance rather than their credentials, and proof that the system could be challenged from within. Her phone buzzed one more time. A message from her younger sister. "Mom's watching the news. She's crying, but she's proud. We all are. Go change the world, Maya." Maya typed back a single word: "Watch me." Then she turned away from the chaos outside, walked deeper into the Federal Building, and began making the calls that would reshape the Chicago Police Department from the ground up. The reckoning wasn't over. It had only just begun. And this time, the people in power would have to answer for what they'd done. 2 weeks later, the conference room at Chicago Police Headquarters buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled. Officers in uniform, community leaders in business attire, reporters with notebooks poised, and civilians who'd witnessed the Federal Plaza incident. The room's capacity was set at 120 people, but nearly 150 had crammed inside, with another 100 watching via livestream in overflow rooms throughout the building. Maya stood at the podium, her crimson blazer replaced today with a sharp navy suit, and the gleaming badge of the chief of police pinned prominently over her heart. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellowish shadow, nearly covered by makeup, but still visible enough to remind everyone why they were there. Behind her on the wall, a projection screen displayed the seal of the Chicago Police Department. To her left sat Lieutenant Sarah Mendez with a thick folder of investigation findings. To her right, Mayor Johnson, his expression grave and determined. Maya tapped the microphone once, and the room fell silent. 2 weeks ago, on October 15th, I was violently detained by 3 officers from this department while performing my duties as your chief of police. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled the room without strain. Today, we're here to discuss the findings of the internal affairs investigation, the consequences for those involved, and most importantly, the systemic changes we're implementing to ensure this never happens again. She gestured to Lieutenant Mendez, who stood and opened the folder. The investigation reviewed footage from 6 security cameras, 43 civilian phone recordings, and 1 functioning body camera, Mendez began, her tone clinical and precise. We interviewed 87 witnesses, reviewed 3 officers' personnel files going back to their academy days, and analyzed departmental protocols that were violated during the incident. Mendez clicked a remote, and the screen behind Maya changed to show a timeline of events, minute by minute. Each violation marked in red. At 1:47 p.m., Lieutenant Raymond Dawson, Officer Luis Torres, and Officer Patrick Brennan approached Chief Richardson without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. At 1:48 p.m., they initiated physical contact without attempting verbal de-escalation, violating Directive 2847B. At 1:49 p.m., they forcibly restrained Chief Richardson despite her compliance, violating use of force protocols. At 1:52 p.m., they refused to properly examine her credentials despite multiple requests. The timeline continued, each red mark a dagger through the department's credibility. The room remained absolutely silent except for Mendez's voice. During the 23-minute detention, Lieutenant Dawson made 6 racially charged statements. Officer Torres failed to intervene in a superior's misconduct, and Officer Brennan remained complicit through inaction despite expressing private doubts. Additionally, Lieutenant Dawson deliberately deactivated his body camera before approaching Chief Richardson, a direct violation of transparency protocols. Mendez closed the folder with a sharp snap. In my 18 years conducting internal investigations, I have never encountered such a comprehensive pattern of misconduct occurring in such a short time frame. This was not a mistake. This was systemic failure manifesting through individual actors. Maya stepped forward again. Thank you, Lieutenant Mendez. Now for the consequences. The room leaned forward collectively. Lieutenant Raymond Dawson has been terminated from the Chicago Police Department, effective immediately. He is ineligible for rehire in any law enforcement capacity within the city. Additionally, the Cook County State's Attorney is pursuing criminal charges for assault, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. Officer Luis Torres has been terminated and will undergo a mandatory review period before being eligible to reapply to any law enforcement position. His academy training will be re-evaluated, and he will be required to complete comprehensive bias training and psychological evaluation before consideration for future employment. Maya paused. Letting the weight settle, Officer Patrick Brennan presents a more complex case. His 10-year record shows consistent community engagement and no prior complaints. His body camera was functioning, providing crucial evidence, and witnesses reported that he expressed hesitation during the incident. Though he failed to act on those doubts, she clicked the remote, bringing up Brennan's personnel file. Officer Brennan has been suspended without pay for 6 months. He will undergo mandatory bias training, community service requirements, and psychological evaluation. Upon completion and pending satisfactory performance reviews, he may be reinstated to duty, but not to his previous position. He will be reassigned to community outreach, where he will work directly with the populations he failed to protect. A hand shot up in the press section. Maya nodded. Chief Richardson, some critics are saying Brennan's punishment is too lenient given his complicity. How do you respond? Maya's expression was thoughtful. I believe in accountability, but I also believe in redemption when it's genuine. Officer Brennan's decade of service showed someone capable of better judgment. His failure was moral cowardice in a critical moment, not the deep-seated prejudice exhibited by Lieutenant Dawson. If he completes his requirements and demonstrates real growth, he has the opportunity to become part of the solution. But make no mistake, he's on probation for life in this department. One more violation and he's gone. Another reporter called out, "What about the culture that allowed this to happen?" 3 officers felt empowered to assault their own chief. That suggests deep institutional problems. You're absolutely right, Maya said, and the admission seemed to surprise the room. Which brings me to the reforms we're implementing immediately. She clicked to a new slide titled, Reforming Chicago PD, 5 Pillars of Change. First, mandatory de-escalation training for every officer in this department, from rookie to commander. Not the 2-hour seminar we currently offer, but a 40-hour intensive program developed in partnership with civil rights organizations and community leaders. Officers will be retrained on seeing civilians as people first, suspects second. The screen changed to show training curriculum details. Second, body camera compliance will be absolute. Any officer who deactivates their camera during a public interaction without documented equipment failure will face immediate suspension. 3 violations result in termination. No exceptions, no excuses. We've also secured funding for cameras that cannot be manually deactivated. They'll run continuously during every shift. Murmurs of approval rippled through the civilian. Attendees. Third, we're establishing a civilian oversight board with full investigative powers. This board will have access to all complaint files, body camera footage, and departmental records. They will be composed of community members, civil rights attorneys, and former officers with clean records. Their recommendations will be binding, not advisory. A uniformed officer in the back stood up. Chief, with respect, that sounds like we're being policed by people who don't understand the job. Maya met his eyes directly. Officer, we just proved that policing ourselves isn't working. The oversight board will include former officers who do understand the job. But it will also include the people we're sworn to serve, who understand what it feels like when we get it wrong. If you're doing your job properly, you have nothing to fear from transparency. The officer sat down, nodding slowly. Fourth, we're implementing a bias incident reporting system. Any officer who witnesses conduct by a fellow officer that appears racially motivated, whether against civilians or colleagues, is required to report it. Failure to report makes you complicit. We're also creating a confidential hotline for officers who want to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. Maya's voice hardened. Let me be crystal clear. The blue wall of silence ends today. Protecting bad officers doesn't make you loyal. It makes you an accomplice. Real loyalty means holding each other to the highest standards, not the lowest common denominator. The room erupted in applause, from civilians and notably from a substantial portion of the uniformed officers present. And fifth, we're launching a community partnership initiative. Every district will host monthly town halls where residents can speak directly to their district commanders. We're creating ride-along programs, youth mentorship opportunities, and joint community police task forces on neighborhood safety. We will rebuild trust one conversation, one interaction, one relationship at a time. Mayor Johnson stood, adding his voice. The city is committing $15 million in funding for these reforms. This isn't symbolic. This is a complete restructuring of how Chicago PD operates. And Chief Richardson has my full support to see it through. A community organizer in the front row raised her hand. Maya nodded to her. Chief Richardson, I appreciate these reforms, but I have to ask, how do we know this isn't just performative? How do we know that once the media attention fades, things won't go back to how they were? Maya stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the audience. You know, because I'm not going anywhere. What happened to me on Federal Plaza wasn't an isolated incident. It was a mirror reflecting decades of systemic problems. But here's the difference. I have the power now to break that mirror and rebuild something better in its place. She gestured to the crowd. You know, because we're putting systems in place that don't depend on any single person's good intentions. Civilian oversight with teeth. Cameras that can't be turned off. Mandatory reporting that makes silence a fireable offense. These aren't policies I can quietly abandon next year. They're structural changes that will outlast my tenure. The organizer nodded, satisfied. Maya returned to the podium. I want to address something that's been said repeatedly over the past 2 weeks. People keep calling what happened to me shocking or unbelievable, but it's not. It's predictable. It's the same thing that happens to black and brown people every single day in this country. The only difference is that I had the credentials to prove who I was and the platform to demand accountability. She paused, her voice dropping but somehow carrying more weight. The 17-year-old girl who got her debate trophy dumped on a police car hood. She had no platform. The 24-year-old law student detained in her own parking garage. No one filmed it. The 35-year-old captain accused of shoplifting. It never made the news. I was all of those people, and the system failed me every single time, until I became the system. The room was silent now, hanging on every word. So when people ask me if I'm going to let this incident define my tenure as chief, my answer is yes, but not the way they think. This incident doesn't define me as a victim. It defines me as someone who knows exactly what we're fighting against, because I've lived it. And that makes me uniquely qualified to tear down the structures that allowed it to happen. Maya's eyes swept across the room. Officers, civilians, reporters, all watching her with rapt attention. To the officers in this room who are afraid of these changes, I understand. Change is uncomfortable, especially when it challenges the way you've been trained to think and act. But I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be better, to see people's humanity before their skin color, to exhaust every peaceful option before resorting to force, to remember that the badge is a responsibility, not a shield for misconduct. She turned to the civilian section, to the community members who have been hurt, profiled and brutalized by officers who looked like Dawson. Torres and Brennan, I see you. I believe you, and I'm committed to making this department worthy of your trust again. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. You have my word. The purple-haired streamer, whose video had now been viewed over 3 million times, raised her hand. Maya smiled and pointed to her. Chief, you've become a symbol for a lot of people. How do you handle that pressure? Maya considered the question carefully. I don't think of myself as a symbol. I think of myself as a person who was given an opportunity to make a difference, and I'm going to use every single day of my tenure to honor that opportunity. The real symbols aren't individuals. They're the systems we build and the changes we make that outlast any one person. She glanced at the clock on the wall, then back at the assembled crowd. Before we conclude, I want to share one more thing. After the Federal Plaza incident, I received over 10,000 messages. Some were supportive, some were hateful. But the ones that stayed with me were from young people, especially young black girls and women, who said they saw themselves in me, who said that watching me stand up and speak truth to power made them believe they could do the same. Maya's voice thickened, with emotion for the first time. To those young people, you don't need to wait for permission to demand justice. You don't need a badge or a title to stand up for what's right. What happened to me was wrong, but the way I responded, calmly, strategically, and with absolute certainty in my worth, that's available to everyone. Know your rights. Document injustice when you see it. Use your voice. And never ever let anyone convince you that you don't belong somewhere simply because of how you look. The applause began slowly, then built into a crescendo that shook the room. Officers stood. Civilians stood. Even the reporters, trained to remain neutral, found themselves on their feet. Maya let it wash over her for a moment, then raised her hand for silence. One final thought. Lieutenant Dawson said something to me that day that I want to address directly. He said, "People like you always think a suit makes you untouchable." He was wrong about the suit, but he was accidentally right about something else. She leaned into the microphone, her voice ringing with conviction. I am untouchable, not because of what I wear, but because of what I know. I know my rights. I know my worth. I know my power. And I know that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That knowledge made me untouchable on Federal Plaza, and that same knowledge is available to every person in this city. Maya stepped back from the podium, her statement complete. The room erupted again, this time with questions shouted from every direction. But she simply smiled, gave a small nod to Lieutenant Mendez and Mayor Johnson, and walked toward the exit with the same steady, dignified pace she'd used when climbing the courthouse steps 2 weeks ago. As she reached the door, the construction worker from Federal Plaza stood near the hallway, having attended specifically to hear the outcome. He extended his hand, and Maya shook it. "You did it," he said simply. "You actually changed things," Maya smiled. "We did it. Every person who filmed, who testified, who refused to look away, we did this together." She walked down the hallway of Chicago Police Headquarters, her heels clicking against polished floors, past walls lined with photos of former chiefs, all of them white men. Until now. Her own portrait would join them someday. But she wasn't thinking about legacy or history at that moment. She was thinking about the 17-year-old girl who'd watched her achievements scattered on a police car hood, and how that girl had promised herself she'd never let anyone make her feel small again. She was thinking about the 24-year-old law student who'd gathered her books from an oil-stained garage floor and decided that if the system wouldn't protect people like her, she'd have to change the system from within. She was thinking about the 35-year-old captain who'd walked out of a Whole Foods with paid groceries and crystallized rage, knowing that no amount of rank would shield her from prejudice unless she reached the very top. And she was thinking about the woman she'd become, someone who'd been thrown to the ground in front of the world and had stood back up with enough power to reshape an entire institution. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. "Watching the press conference. You're going to change everything. Dad would be so proud." Maya typed back as she pushed through the building's front doors into the autumn sunshine. "Already am." Outside, the world continued its rhythm. Cars honked. People rushed to appointments. The city moved forward as cities do. But something fundamental had shifted. A line had been drawn. A standard had been set, and a woman who'd been seen as nothing had proven she was everything the city needed. The reckoning wasn't just complete. It was only the beginning of a transformation that would ripple through Chicago, through departments across the nation, and through every young person who'd watched and learned that dignity, knowledge, and courage could topple even the most entrenched systems of injustice. Maya Richardson walked toward her car, the badge over her heart catching the sunlight, and she carried with her not just the weight of authority, but the unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was born to do, changing the world, one policy, one conversation, one moment of accountability at a time, and she was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.